Hey there, and welcome back to my show. In this episode, we're covering PCS to profit, buy and hold strategies and buy and sell strategies using the VA loan. I'm Kimber Hill, an active duty spouse, sharing how I navigate my military lifestyle. I cover topics like remote work, building wealth in real estate, and other ways to maximize your military benefits. Subscribe and consider me your MilSpouse bestie.
Hello, everybody. Welcome in. I am Katie, community expert at the Military MLS. Welcome to PCS to Profit. We are so excited to have you here today. So we've got a great session today. So let's get into it. I'm thrilled to introduce someone who knows the real estate journey inside and out. Kimber Hill, CEO of the Military MLS and VertForce.
Thank you, Katie. Hi, everybody. It's good to see you here in our Zoom room. I want to talk to you about PCS to profit today. The whole goal is to help you learn how to maximize your VA loan benefit because we are focused on making sure that even just making one baby step and purchasing your first home using the VA loan can be the key that unlocks newfound long-term wealth and long-term wealth strategies for your family. So we are excited to have you. First and foremost, I think that the VA loan can be very overwhelming. But I think here's also the thing, as military families, as military connected individuals, once you understand the VA loan, you completely unlock a new way of thinking about wealth building for your family, retirement portfolios for your family. And really, that's what we want to help you do today. We want you to think about long-term financial security and how real estate can impact that and how the VA loan opens the door. And it's really a cheat code, right? I mean, if anyone here has used the VA loan before, then you know that it's a little bit of a cheat code. You know that when you use it, you are a more competitive buyer, and you know that you can use it multiple times. If you don't know that, we're gonna bust that myth for you today. So let's keep going here. I have scheduled 2 guests to speak to us today. And first of all, this event is first and foremost made possible by our partnership with NewRez. We have aligned the military MLS with NewRez. We love them because they have incredibly competitive rates. They have incredibly competitive customer service and supportive customer service that's consistently there for you. They have a team of VA loan experts who are always available. But like most importantly for me, they're national. So as we're talking about you needing to potentially move from San Diego to Virginia or vice versa, or you're moving every 3 years, we want you to have a lender who can support you in every state that you're in. You know, you call the same person or the same team every time you need support. So I brought them on to introduce you to them, but also really just to give us some VA loan education today and help you understand this super powerful tool that's at the tip of your fingers. And when we talk about it as a cheat code, I want you to know how strong of a buyer you are and how many times you can use it. And then I brought my friend Elizabeth Colgrove. On social media, Elizabeth is known as the reluctant landlord. And she's raw. She's truthful. She will put it out there for you. And she's going to talk to you about different strategies of what their family has gone through and where they are today with their rental property investments and all of the properties that they hold. And Michelle's going to chat with us back and forth about buy and hold strategies versus buy and sell strategies, how the VA loan can support. But Elizabeth can also bring in components of, hey, if you exhaust your VA loan, there are other tools and resources for you to use. So let's get into it. This is a real conversation. You can submit questions at any point in time. Hello, Elisa from Puerto Rico, currently in Mississippi, about to move to South Carolina. Good to see you. Joe and Angie Craig, they're currently in Wright-Patterson, Ohio, about to PCS to Kessler. Kendra said she's used the VA loan a few times, but had great lenders that made it easy. The lender is so important. Mm-hmm. And then we have, what is STX? SAT.
That's San
South
Antonio.
Texas? San Antonio. Oh, okay. San Antonio, Texas, PCSing to Vegas, VA loan used once. Thank you guys so much for chiming in the chat. Let's go ahead and start busting some VA loan myths with Michelle Crumley.
Always good to see you guys.
I hear this all the time from our community members and from our military affiliated members and from veterans. I thought that you could only use the VA loan once. Is that true?
It is not true. Shh, don't tell anybody. Actually, tell everybody.
Yeah.
Once you have earned your VA home loan benefit, that benefit 99.9% of the time, the rest of your life, you have that benefit. So what does change is how much entitlement, because once you've earned your benefit, you have entitlement. That is what VA uses in essence to guarantee or back that loan. And depending on how much entitlement you have in use or how much you have freed up goes into having multiple properties at one time with VA or whether you should only have one, all those things that come into it. But you
Mhm.
absolutely can use and reuse and reuse and reuse and reuse your
Mhm.
VA home loan benefit
Mhm.
as long as you've got the entitlement that is there to go with it.
So let's talk about how that applies to those two main strategies. And really, what I want to talk about is we have people on the call who are interested in only buying and selling their own properties.
Mhm,
And then we have people on the call who think, I want to build a portfolio. I want to have 10 properties by the time we're finished with active duty life. Or I'm a veteran and I'm ready to start exercising my ability to acquire properties.
mhm.
Let's talk about the loan in that context. We can start with buy and sell.
Absolutely, and this is where a lot, and I would say the majority of our families reside, is that, you buy a home, you're going to live in it, you PCS to the next duty station, you sell it, build some equity, right? Take that
Mhm.
equity out, use that for the next transaction, and so on and so forth. So if you are thinking, "I really don't wanna be a landlord, I really when our time at our duty station is done, I really want to sell." I don't
Mhm.
wanna be a long distance landlord or deal with a property management company.
Mhm.
Then I would tell you that what you're thinking about is what house, where is it going to be located, right? Your mindset is a little bit different. And you want to ensure that you are buying a home that in 2 to 4 years, whatever time frame you're looking at, you're gonna
Yeah.
have an easy time to sell, right?
Yeah.
So thinking about what is the market in that location? What are the homes
Yeah.
like? Two bedroom versus a one bedroom. Two bedroom house is going to sell much easier than a one bedroom. So kind of
Right.
thinking through what is going to make the most sense
Yeah.
for someone to want to buy that house.
I think that that's a really valid point. A lot of military families indicate I'm only going to be here for 18 months to 24 months to 36 months. Is it worth me purchasing? I can name a few markets off the top of my head where I would say I would be so upset with you if you didn't purchase even if you were going to be there for 3 years because the market is some of the strongest in the country. And they're hubbing around duty stations, especially when we have like tri-base areas where we have multiple military bases and we have, military population of like 30,000 people there consistently. Those are the areas where you have a super strong opportunity to build equity in only 3 years, or
Mhm.
considering you could potentially could get stationed there 2 years back to 2 tours back to back, 6 years of equity, and then sell when you leave or rent it out when you leave. I'm going to take a
What?
pause here and just respond to two things in our chat. Esmeralda says, we are heading to Mississippi. They're currently on the VA loan and they want to buy a home in Mississippi. Now I'm stressed. So she says, tell me I'm stressed without telling me I'm stressed. No, they're in Washington headed to Mississippi. My bad. Esmeralda, you're going to be fine. You're going to be fine. You got a big support system here to help support you. And then Nikki says, how much money for savings is recommended setting aside for covering when you buy at one location for PCS and want to buy again in the next location for all that limbo time of will the house sell and paying the mortgage in another state? If I no, I get it. I get what you're asking, Nikki. Michelle, do you want to respond to that?
Absolutely. So one of the things, right, there's also this myth associated with the VA loan that not only can you only use it one time, but that you can only have one VA loan at a time. And that actually the answer is, it's always our favorite answer, is it depends. It depends on how much entitlement that you used. So there is a limit to the amount of entitlement, but if you don't go in and buy the most expensive house, if you try to think through the fact that I want to use and have multiple VA loans over time that are active, then I could make a decision, maybe instead of that 4-bedroom house in this one area that's going to cost this amount, I could buy a 2-unit property, live in one side, rent out the other, and maybe I have some entitlement that is left to use at the next location. Or I do a single family and it's a smaller home, but it'll rent easy, really good rental potential in the future. When I move, I have remaining entitlement and I can then purchase again. I have seen and had clients that have had up to, I think the most I've seen is 5 active VA loans in play that they had VA loans on at once. And they had started over a 15, 20-year career buying in a duty station, keeping that home, keeping it as a rental, having enough entitlement to buy in the next, keep it, and so on and so forth. So the answer to that question is it's going to depend on how much money you need to save based on what your plans are with the existing home, what the timing is on that, and what is the timing on the purchase. And we could easily run scenarios for you that show you what that looks like from an entitlement standpoint. And there's also lots of tools and resources out there to help you figure out buy versus rent analysis. What is in different locations? What is the average or expected appreciation over 2, 4, 5, 10 years to kind of see where that break even point falls?
And Nikki was talking about doing the multifamily home.
Mhm.
I love that conversation topic. Nikki, Michelle, do you want to touch on it briefly before we keep going?
Would love to.
Okay.
So VA allows a 1 to 4 unit property. That is considered residential. And as long as, right, the VA loan from an occupancy standpoint says that you have to own or occupy that property when you purchase it, not down the line what you do with it, but at the time that you purchase it, it needs to be owner occupied. So when you've got multi-unit, you as the individual using your entitlement, you have to owner occupy one of those units. Then you have the ability to rent out absolutely out of the gate. And then there are times you can even use the rental income on those other units to qualify for the mortgage. So there's parameters there, but that's absolutely feasible. So you buy a multi-unit, 2 to 4 unit, live in one, rent out the others. Next duty station, you leave, right? You keep that property and rent out the unit that you were in. Now you have a multi-unit full rental property working for you passively from an
Mhm.
income standpoint. Paul has a great question out here that I think just to take a minute, because this, especially when you've got a uh, dual veterans in the house,
Yeah.
or that you're looking at purchasing with another vet that's also using entitlement. Unfortunately, that's great. You're absolutely can do that, but it's not like you get to double
Mhm.
what entitlement is allowed or what the max loan amount is. There's still some requirements that have to be met. So if the max loan amount in an area was 1 million, 1.2 million, let's say, or like right around San Diego, it's not like all of a sudden VA says, well, it's 2 veterans, so we'll make the max loan amount 2.2 million because it's 2 vets. It's not quite how that works. There's a whole lot of mathematics behind that. But Paul, if you've got specific situation, we can work through those and be able to explain that so that you can see it.
What I do want to clear up is if you are not of the buy and sell mind, you're not thinking, I just want to buy this property and sell it when I leave the duty station, and you want to consider renting it, we do need to bust this myth, which is that I can't use a VA loan if I am renting the property out. Correct? Has anyone heard that? If you've heard that, you can put your hand up or throw an emoji in the chat to tell us if you've heard it or not. But Michelle, let's talk about occupancy.
Occupancy,
Yeah.
absolutely. So the VA loan has been designed to help veterans, service members with the eligibility to purchase an owner-occupied primary residence. VA knows you are, especially military or vet, you're moving often. The expectation isn't that this is for your ever home and you have to occupy it forever. Once you have met that obligation and you get orders to the next location and you move, you can absolutely take that owner occupied property that you're departing and use it as an investment or a rental property. 100%, no problem. VA says that that's no problem. Now you're keeping the house, so that entitlement that's attached to that loan until that loan is gone is tied up. So that will diminish how much entitlement you have for the next home. But that's
Mhm.
okay. You can absolutely rent it out. The question being, well, okay, it has to be owner occupied. Do I have to occupy this for 1 year, 5 years? What's the expectation when you take out that VA loan?
Mhm.
So VA says, your plan should be while I'm here, I am going to live here. This is my home. They don't have a specific time frame. The thought process is if you're buying it, you're calling it owner occupied, you should probably plan on being there for a year, but life happens. What VA really cares about and what has to be documented and feel logical is that at the time that you are closing on that purchase, you have to, one, have the ability to own or occupy. So you're PCSing to a location. You are stationed in a location. You've taken a job in a specific location. You've got the ability to own or occupy, and I have the intent to occupy. If I meet those requirements, I've met VA's requirement for owner occupancy. Then if two months down the line, 2 years down the line, I get orders, I have a child and I need to upgrade or I become an empty nester and I want to downgrade, as long as it makes logical sense and at the time that you purchased, the intent and the ability was to own or occupy, and that's been documented, you've met
Mhm.
the occupancy requirement.
We know that occupancy and intent to occupy are two different things, and that intent to occupy is what is important and must be documented.
Mhm.
So the next thing that we want to talk about, or just close the loop on this, is we know we can use the VA loan multiple times as long as we have at least $1 of entitlement left. But
Mhm.
once we exhaust entitlement, what do we do?
You're gonna have to sell and restore some entitlement, put it back
Mhm.
into our entitlement bank. And when I talk about entitlement, I have a whole 45-minute training on this. So just don't think that, hey, I'm doing my second home and I still don't understand entitlement. I have real estate agents and lenders that have been in the industry for years
Mhm.
that don't know exactly how it works. But you
Mhm.
have, in essence, an entitlement bank that VA says you have the home loan eligibility, you have an entitlement bank, and that entitlement bank is either full, partially full, or exhausted. If it's full, sky's the limit. You can buy whatever you want as long as you qualify for it, and VA says, "No problem, we will guarantee it." But
Mhm.
once you've got entitlement in play, the
Mhm.
amount that you have remaining does have restrictions on how much and when, and will you have to make a down payment? What will it look like? All of these calculations that we would help you work through to see what makes the most sense for you.
Yeah. And for active duty families, a lot of times your entitlement is based on where you're currently stationed, and it can change based on what county you're living in. What to do when we have used all of our entitlement.
Absolutely.
There are also super flexible options at New Res too. Once you have used all of your VA loans, I mean, ideally, if you are an investor, there could be an opportunity for you to get to a point where you've maximized your VA entitlement and you want to continue to purchase other properties. New Res has the entire gamut, and Elizabeth, I think, is a good option to speak to us in a few minutes about what that looks like and how to use other loan types. It looks like we do have a few questions in the chat. BH wants to know, how do I make the decision to sell or rent? We've owned our home here in Southern California since 2021, and we should be PCSing soon. I just can't decide whether we should rent or sell. This is fun. Let's hold that for a little bit later in the conversation. I think a lot of opinions will probably come up for you, and you will learn a lot, BH, when we talk to Elizabeth too. Working with VA loan experts is super important. So there are a lot of mistakes that we see, but the biggest one that we see is if you choose to work with a lender who really doesn't understand what the VA loan is and how to explore the VA loan and how to use it as a benefit for you. So, for example, for those of you who came to our fall session, we did this about 90 days ago. We had a military veteran in the room who, when he got out of the service, purchased his first home. And during that process, he was working with a lender and an agent, neither who knew anything about VA loan types, and was pushed into a conventional loan that ended up costing him a lot of money. And so during that call, we identified and educated him on the VA loan. He has since done an EARL refinance. He has since done a refinance into a VA loan and has been saving a ton of money from doing that and is now using his VA loan benefit to the full extent. So we're very excited for him, but we don't want that to happen to you. So whether or not you work with the military MLS team, whether or not you work with New Res, we really want you to walk away from this call knowing that if you sell your house, if you buy a house, if you need a mortgage, if you're going to pursue a loan, please do not work with someone who can't answer a few simple questions. So, Michelle, would you like to tell us what the evaluation questions are? You had some good ones.
Absolutely. One is if you ask them, can you have more than one VA loan at a time? If they say, no, you can't, you run, run. If they say you can only use your VA one time, right? Run. If you are active duty and they ask you for a pay stub and not an LES, run, right? That is not a military expert. They don't know those inner workings of our world.
Okay.
But ask them, how many VA loans have you been a lender for? How many transactions have you done? Explain to me how entitlement works. Ask them some specific questions to see how they respond that you know the answers to.
Yes. And we do that vetting at the military MLS. What we do at the military MLS is we allow military spouse agents and veteran agents and even some active duty agents who specialize in working with the military in the real estate space to join our network. And so we help match you to them. So you get to be supported by a military connected agent. And we guarantee that they're going to have experience in servicing the military because they are military, right? They've been through it themselves personally. And New Res is also one of the reasons why we're bringing this education to you today. We want you to know that there are nuances around this loan type. There are nuances around it to make it go effectively and to get you to closing and to give you the biggest benefit. So that's why we want you to work with military connected and affiliated organizations. But Elizabeth, I would love for you to come on and let's start with how it started with you with the VA loan and how that VA loan entitlement led to building financial security for your family.
So we bought our first house in 2011, but it was so funny because we went to look at rentals in 2010 in Kingsville, Texas, and I wanted to buy so bad. And my husband's like, "We're gonna be here 1 year." Absolutely not. So I remember the agent was like, "If you just bought this, it'd be so much easier." And I remember looking at my husband and like throwing a temper tantrum and like walking out. And he's like, "Yes, babes, I know." So when we went to Virginia Beach, it was so much cheaper to or to own versus rent. And so that got us started. So we bought a foreclosure, we fixed it up, we rented it out. We moved again, we did the same thing until we ran out of entitlement. One of the things that we did is you could do a conventional 5% loan. So we did those rather than sell the house to get our entitlement back. And so we just kept rolling it. And then there hit a point in 2016 where like we were maxed out. Nobody would touch us, no one would lend to us, like we were done, but we had all these like nuggets. So then we started like flipping the nuggets into better houses, different houses, etc. And so for us, it's always been about creating this little portfolio all while putting, our family first.
So, how many mortgages are you currently overseeing right now, if you're comfortable sharing?
Yeah, absolutely. We have 12 mortgages worth about 7.5 million.
Thank you. And how many of those are with New Res?
5. That was really funny when we figured that out. That was a good day. Yeah,
Thank you. Thank
so
you. Yeah. And so,
yeah,
how many houses have you bought and sold?
40. But I
40.
but I also did a bunch for like on the side for like flixes and flips and stuff. So more than just moving, obviously. But the easiest way to move and live in them is to move and live in them. I think we've probably done nine. I think 9 or 10 we've actually lived in.
Yeah. So I think that that's a really good juxtaposition for those of you who are thinking long-term strategy. Yeah, you need to open the door by buying your first house if you have not bought your first home yet. But Elizabeth has bought and sold 40, which means it's absolutely possible for you to buy and sell more than one. With that in mind, she's holding 12. So we understand that not every single investment is going to be the investment that you hold on to forever, and not every single investment is going to be the one that is the most profitable, right?
I think what's really important to understand, and it's taken me 15 years and a lot of talking with people, is I think I said this to someone. I'm like, what lets you sleep at night? So, like, where I am today at 37 with 3 children is not where I was at 22 with no children. So you need to figure out what you want. For us, in the early days, we bought and sold and flipped and moved and whatever. And then now I haven't really bought a house in 2 years to like do on the side project. So the
Mm-hmm.
question isn't to compare your numbers to my numbers. The question is to figure out what your family needs. I tried to find a job in 2011 and no one would hire me. So buying a house, fixing it up, renting it out was my way of putting money in my family's pocket and still meeting my financial goals. And I love real estate, right? So to do that. So the key is like what works for your financial picture. If you're two dual military, and you're making $130,000 each, doing this big side hustle might not be the asset. Maybe just buying your house and keeping it and renting it out long term and going from there.
I think that's a great objective. All right, for everybody who's here, if you know what your family goal is, would you put it in the chat so we can see what are you interested in? So Elizabeth's was I needed to replace an income, and I see myself being at a point where that income is fully flowing.
Well, no, our dream was for early retirement at 20. So we wanted to be financial
Mm.
free when we early retired. But I have a master's degree and no one would hire me. I had a background with Toyota. And when I started to do it, no one would hire me as a military wife. So this was my way of creating my income to hit
Yeah,
my dream of financial freedom at 20 years of military
20
service.
years. So financial freedom at 20 years. That's where Elizabeth is. I would love to see everybody else's. Kristen Byers says homestead. Thank you. Paul, you said same. So Paul, is that financial freedom at 20? That's where I am. That's exactly where I am too, Elizabeth. That's our goal is we want financial freedom post service, post service. And really that's why I call this loan type and this advantage you have of moving while you PCS, it's a cheat code, like being able to have the life event that is guaranteed to happen every 3 years, that it sets you up to be able to rinse and repeat this process. Joe says we'd like to have 5 to 10 rentals. We currently have 2 and we will rent our current property, making it 3. Congratulations, Joe. Make sure you are advertising your rentals for free on the Military MLS, our forever free platform. We want to help attract tenants to your properties. Nikki, grow wealth while in military on top of the TSP and the IRA to end up in the dream home paid off at retirement. Financial freedom for the win. I think we are all here. We are all here for the same reasons. But ultimately, I want to speak briefly to the concept of your plans can change. You can do what feels right in the moment and be okay with making those decisions every moment. But I want to tell you, our first decision to buy a house in 2019 has turned into something that's been really great for us. We have now over $100,000 in property value increase. Just the land that the house is on has gone up in value, $100,000. And then, of course, you have the amount of money that we've actually paid on the mortgage over time. And we have our tenants who are in that property. We've had tenants in the property for, I think, 5 years at this point. So we have our, income on the tenant's rent. It's so small. And all we have to do is maintenance that property once a year, and we renew leases every 3 years. So just making that one small step to move forward is such a great decision for you. And also choosing to buy at your duty stations is such a great step because we bought at another duty station that we 100% planned to rent it out. But because the market spiked, we were able to sell it for, I think, almost a $200,000 profit. So these are big numbers that can really impact you if you take the chance and move forward. They can really support your family. So Kristen wants to know, is this the same process for veterans? So Kristen, I think you're talking about the VA loan application and entitlement. Is that right? And you can use the chat, Kristen. Okay, yes. Kristen Byers wants to know, is this the same process for veterans? Michelle, you want to talk about the VA loan as it applies to veterans?
Absolutely. So the VA loan itself does not differentiate with guidelines and say only these guidelines apply to veterans and only these guidelines apply to our active duty service members. So the VA loan, outside of whether or not you're exempt from the VA funding fee because of disability, right?
Mhm.
That's a veteran part of that. But outside of that part of the discussion, the guidelines for the VA loan are the same whether you are active duty or whether you're a vet.
Okay. Thank you so much, Michelle.
Mhm.
Kristen, does that answer your question? That's awesome. Thank you. Okay, very good, Kristen. Feel free to reach
Kimber,
out.
Kimber, I did note that there are a number of questions relating to capital gains. I would say that one of the things that we might want to do, just because a CPA knows all of the legalese, ins and outs, is we may want to have um, a CPA or a accountant that we could potentially have on that could talk specifically to the questions on capital gains and when it's still considered a primary in the active duty world versus when it's not and what that looks like.
Okay, thanks, Michelle. I like that suggestion. Let's go up to Esmeralda. Earlier in the call, she wanted to ask a question about VA assumable loans. So, Esmeralda, let's take a moment to address VA assumable loans. Esmeralda, use the chat if you have specific questions about VA assumables. Michelle, would you like to give us an overview of what that looks like with new res? And then I'd love to know if Elizabeth's ever done one.
Absolutely. So, an assumption, right? One of the wonderful benefits of the VA loan is it's a government-backed loan. Therefore, that loan is assumable, which means if I, the seller, am willing to entertain letting somebody else come in and assume my loan in that purchase concept, right? Instead of them going necessarily and getting their own loan, they want to assume what's left on mine. They can absolutely do that on a VA loan. They still have to qualify for it, but they can assume that loan. Now, there are two things that I always like to make sure when anyone wants to consider an assumption on either side, purchase or sell, is there are two things to be aware of. One, whatever is owed on that property, right? So whatever the seller still owes probably isn't what they're selling it for. So not only do you need to know what they owe, because you're going to be inheriting, taking over that loan, but you've got to, as the buyer, be able to bring to closing the difference between what that amount that is still owed on that VA loan and what the seller is selling it for. So if they owe 200 still on a house and they're selling it for 400, that means you're assuming the 200,000 that's left at whatever that rate was, but you have to have the 200,000 in cash to make up that difference for that seller at the closing table. And that's just, again, using some round numbers, but understanding that there's that gap. And do you have the means as the buyer to cover that?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
The other thing that I like to make sure on an assumption is VA does not care if the assumer, the person that is going to that buyer, is a veteran or not. But me as the seller that wants my entitlement back, not just do I want off the loan, but I want my entitlement back, then I need to make sure that that buyer is a veteran in their own right with that home loan eligibility and their entitlement intact that can substitute their entitlement for mine. So not only do I come off the loan, but I also get my entitlement back. So there
Mhm.
are two main things that I think things get hung up if you don't truly understand that I
Yeah.
want to make sure.
And you will get solicited if you are selling a house and you are selling it as assumable. You will get solicited for people who are not VA buyers to assume your mortgage. And that means your name stays on the mortgage. And that's really not assuming. All they're doing is taking responsibility for making those payments. That's really more of like an arbitrage
Yeah,
situation.
so their name is going on the loan. The note and deed are in the new buyer's name. But that entitlement that was taken from the seller's entitlement bank to guarantee the loan in case of default, that entitlement is still being used then to back that loan if the incoming seller doesn't have entitlement. So you're not liable for the loan, but you don't get your entitlement back to reuse until somewhere down the line when that loan is paid off.
So if you are interested in looking at assuming a loan, we do advertise on the military MLS if the loan is VA assumable or not. So every listing on homes for sale, if it is a VA loan and it is assumable and the seller is open to having it assumed, it will be marked as assumable. So you can head over to the militarymls.us and look at our listings. Bear with us as this is version 1 of our web platform, so it will get a lot more user friendly and a lot more beautiful over time. Windrush says, I bought 4 homes using my CONUS Tours of Duty while active duty for 23 years. Congratulations. Pros and cons compared to renting. So what's the question here?
Or was that
When,
just a statement that there are pros and cons on either side on what you
yeah,
choose to do?
yeah, I think that's a good topic of conversation for us to review. I don't like renting, but there are certain markets that I wouldn't buy in. But I don't like renting. So I always tell my husband when it's time to put preference sheets up to stack his preferences based on where we could buy real estate because there are certain cities that I won't touch. But I'm different. Like Elizabeth buys a ton of houses in one of the cities that I would be afraid to purchase in.
Oh, we did that too in Anacortes. So you need to laugh, right? So that's what I did. I was like, if I won't buy there, I won't go there. So he wanted Florida or Whidbey. He didn't care. And right when we were looking, an investor went belly up and sold everything. It was beautiful. It was like candy. I was like, you can go there. It was all gone by the time we got orders. I cried for years and never bought anything there because there was nothing else and we should have gone to Florida. But I did that
Oh,
too. So yeah, it was funny. I just thought, and honestly, to this day, I regret it because we didn't buy it because it was $150 too expensive out of our budget. And those houses are triple now. They're like $1 million more. So it's
yeah,
Whidbey Island that blew up. But yes, no,
yeah.
yep, I've been there. I've done that, and I have that story too.
Joe and Angie said, do you recommend LLCs for your properties? My answer is no. I would imagine that yours is too. Elizabeth, maybe Michelle. Let's see what you guys have to say. No, don't do
No,
it.
absolutely not. Uh,
Lots of
we
reasons. Yeah.
we we did it. I'll tell you mine. Michelle can tell you hers. I have 3. Let's say that I do come from a place where most of my houses are California and most of my 10 years of experience, although I'm in Maryland now, comes from there. If you put your house in an LLC, you cannot pierce the veil. And here's 3 ways that most people pierce the veil. One, if the house is in your name. So if the house is in your name, you pierce the veil. You have to get commercial insurance. In California, commercial insurance is about $5,000. Personal insurance for our houses was $847. And yes, it was a short term rental. B, the other thing is if you self manage, that pierces the veil. And then the other thing that Michelle's going to get into is it's very complicated to get financing on a commercial property. It's very different. Now, I'll let Michelle go into that. But we've bought and sold 40 houses. I have only bought and sold 3 of them in an LLC. It was because it was a flip. It used flip funding. It was 13% back when it was 2%, if that tells you anything, and it was required by us. We had a $4,000 policy and a $10,000 liability policy. It was very expensive. It's why we stopped flipping. But I'll let Michelle go into more of the loan side.
Yep. And I think, Elizabeth, you hit the nail on the head. The thing there to be aware of, right, is residential lending. So that 1 to 4 unit primary or home in your personal name, that residential loan in your name has much better terms than if you're talking about a business buying a property. That commercial aspect significantly limits the loan options that you have and the terms that go with them. The VA is a personal loan, right? So that is a residential loan in a person's name. You wouldn't be able to close as an LLC with the VA loan or most Freddie Fannie loans, FHA loans. Those are personal individual loans in the residential area, not commercial.
Yeah, further on that topic is, let's say you buy a house with a VA loan and everyone's like, "Oh, you can rent it out later and put it in the name of your LLC later." How many times I've heard that storyline if I had a dollar for every time I've heard that. It's not accurate. You can accomplish it, but you have to jump through flaming hoops to get there. So like for example, if you buy a home with a VA loan and you try to put it in the name of an LLC, the bank will not let you transfer the mortgage to the name of the LLC. And the whole purpose of doing that is to limit yourself for liability. But the truth of the matter is, every LLC is tied to you. People can identify who an LLC owner is. And if your LLC is sued, a lot of people say that you cannot be sued, but you can. The only way to really protect a property is to put it behind a trust wall. So I think the bottom line is, moving a property into an LLC is a waste of your time and a waste of your energy. And you can't keep the VA loan. If you do it, they'll make you refinance it into a business loan, and that completely changes the terms. Go ahead, Elizabeth.
I think the thing that we need to bring up really quickly is, do you want to do this correctly? So when I hear all of these ideas, the first question I go is, how many times have you gone to court? And from someone who's been to court more than she wants to acknowledge and spent even more in legal fees to stay out of court over the years, the thing is, I'm a big believer in you do it right. You can play in the gray, the legal gray, but you have to do it right. So yes, you can move your VA loan into an LLC very easily. It's a very easy process. It's not legal. Your loan can get called. You can have problems down the road, but yes, you can do it, but don't have an insurance claim like I do and have to be fighting tooth and nail for insurance and expect them to pay out when they realize there's a loophole. So I think the thing that to get into really important is what Michelle and Kimberly and I are talking about is, this is the legal way to do it. These are the things to do it, to stand behind. And when things go wrong, you have something to stand behind. And for someone who spends a lot of time having to defend herself and keep herself out of trouble, like I said, I've been there, done that. I have that story. I told the insurance adjuster the other day, I'm like, I'm getting really smart at this. And you know what he said? I'm so sorry you had to, because every time he sent me the rules, I showed him where he owed me more money now. Because don't send me the rules. I'll show you what you haven't paid me. So my point is, but that only worked because we had followed the rules, because there was nothing they could disqualify us over. And so I think that's why it's so important. It's not that you can't do it. I see it done all day long. I also see where people get themselves in trouble. It's like having no car insurance. Can you drive your car? Absolutely. Do you have to have a car? Like, do you have to have your car registration correct, or insurance on your car, or a driver's license in order to be able to drive down the road? Absolutely not. But if you have any problems,
And you will find that if you take your property that you have purchased on a VA loan and you try to go put it in an LLC, like me, tried to do this, encountered immediately, oh, somebody lied to me, or somebody gave me advice who didn't know that they were talking about, because I can't actually do this legally. You can't do it unless you refinance the loan. So the answer is no. I hope that resolves it. But then we also know Michelle's already disclosed to us that the VA is not tracking whether or not you are renting that property out. But with lots of reasons why we wouldn't do this with the VA loan. Other loan types, maybe. Maybe if you want to explore other loan types outside of the VA loan, let's put you in touch with Michelle and make sure you can check that out. Okay. Let's go back to BH's question, which was a lot earlier in the call. And I asked BH to hold until we could get Elizabeth on, because BH says we've owned our home in SoCal since 2021 and we should be PCSing soon, but we can't decide whether to sell or rent. What do you think?
I think I'm trying to find it. I think I responded. Yes. So the three things or four things that I'm a big believer in. What makes you comfortable? Like I've had this conversation with a couple other people. Um, and if you aren't going to sleep well and you're going to be super nervous, it doesn't matter how much you're going to make. If you're going to be stressed out and you can't do this, you need to sell your house. It's not worth it. I don't care. It's just not worth it. I think the other thing is, are you going to come back? Do you want a placeholder in that market? So for us, there was a long time that we had a house in Virginia Beach. Honestly, my agent, I didn't sell it soon enough for her. And I was like, I am never fighting to have a house. I did something that most people don't think is a good idea, but I always did. We had a reverse military clause in all of our leases that said if we got orders back, we had the right to break the lease too. Because I'm like, I will never be homeless. We had 3 cats for a while. I'm like, I am never going to be homeless with my 3 cats in a car. We're not going to have to find a rental. That was really important to me. And now I have 3 kids and 2 cats, and I'm super not going to be homeless. So we kept just being honest. We kept houses to have a place to go back to. That was super important to us to never be priced out. I will squish all my kids in a room, but I will not have my house. So
Yeah.
that's the other thing that I'm a really big believer. 3, do you want to be a landlord? I love it. It's so
Me
rewarding
too. I love
for
it.
for my
Yeah.
family. It blesses us every day without like I can work before and after the kids. If the kids get sick, there's no one yelling at me. The only person who yells at me is my husband, who's now our CFO, who looks at the book at the end of the month and tells me how much I did or didn't make. Like last
Mhm.
month was not a good month.
Yeah.
So my point is, do you want to run your own business? And if the answer is no, then that might be a good reason to jump off. And then the third thing or the fourth thing that's really important, do you need that down payment money? One of the things that I don't think that's talked about enough, and my husband and I were actually talking about this the other day, is, we've been in for 15 years. We now have 3 kids, 2 cats. We no longer can live on a 40-foot boat and have like a carload of stuff anymore. Excuse me, a trailer. But the thing is, because we keep our houses and we don't sell them, we don't really have like down payment money. I mean, sure, our net worth is great. That's not the point of the conversation. But as my husband likes to say, you can't eat equity, right? So the problem is when we look at another duty station, we have to look again at 350,000 or we have to look at a huge mortgage payment, which either way, your choice. So if you're like, I'm going to pull $300,000 from San Diego or 100,000 or whatever the number is, you're like, does that money what I need for the next duty station? Or what I'm a big believer in and how we've always done it is we've taken that higher mortgage payment, but after we put some money over in our savings account, we've taken that money and applied that to the next house mortgage payment. So that helps us keep that mortgage down. So the thing that I would ask you, if you need that down payment money, if your loan is in 2021, it's probably a 2 to 3% loan, right? So what could you rent it for? If you can rent it for, I'm going to make a number, $1,000 difference or $800 difference, can you take
Mhm.
that $800 and apply it to the next loan? And does that buy you as much or more than buying down that loan amount because rates are so high? These are the things that are just numerical, but
Mhm.
I'm a big believer that it's not just about the numbers. When we got started and I was, 2025 or 2015, when I was 2025, 2026, I was like, it's all about the numbers. And
Mhm.
something that I've learned now is it's about the emotion too. What lets you sleep at night? What
Yeah.
makes you happy?
Yeah, I absolutely agree. And for me, there's nothing more rewarding than to stumble upon military tenants renting from us. We've done civilian tenants and we've done military tenants. They've all been amazing. But there's something that brings me fulfillment and gratitude when I see a fellow service member family getting to take advantage of the property that we've invested in, especially just it's just been fantastic. So BH says, love this perspective. Thank you so much for your response. Paul also asks, Do we have landlord resources? And what I want to say right now, I'm taking a pretty firm stance on this, which is that it is absolutely possible to self-manage your properties. It gets complex when you have multiple properties in multiple states. We have a lot of people firmly take a stance and say use a property management firm. But I will tell you, every single military family that I speak to who has used a property management firm says, I'm just not 100% happy. But I also want to share with you, managing a property does not have to be significantly difficult. We're going to come out with a video or we can do a live Zoom call, or we can do a video of how to be a landlord, which talks about being compliant and basic, simple processes to execute this activity. Essentially, you need a legally compliant lease. And if you have to make uh, changes to it, like adding in the reverse clause, which we have too, which says that we can move back in if our orders change. And you have to think about the things in the property that you do or you do not want to happen, like smoking, pets, etc., and what the penalties are if those things are found out. Establishing your legally compliant lease is important. Having a legally compliant tenant review process is easy and important. I want to emphasize this is all easy and important. You could take 20 hours out of your year to develop these processes for one property for yourself. And you could take a few days out of your year to let tenants tour your property and view your property. And you could take some time to set up who your referral points are in the city if you're not there, and be smooth sailing, managing your own property. Let's give some context here too. You own how many she does short-term rentals, and those are exponentially more time intensive, right?
I do long term too. I have 16 short term or 14. I lost count. I have 14 to 16 short term, and I have 4 long term ish. Because I manage my family too that I
Yeah.
do.
Okay.
So one of the things is we do both, but like all of our stuff long term is in the state of California. I live in the state of Maryland. We started short term rentals the day we moved from California, from NAS Lemoore to Whidbey Island and Anacortes. We've done pretty much our entire career has been self-managing from the distance. I'm a big believer, and there's a couple of points that you go out. I always go out for the move in, and I always go out for the move out. Those 2 times, always. And the one time I didn't, I got sued because it lets you look eyes and see the problem and see if people are disregarding or whatever. So other than that, I I've done everything remote. I mean, you can do it with pictures and technology. And if there's a really big problem, you can fly out. My husband laughed at me, but there were many times where when we had stuff in Charleston and we lived in California, I would leave after work at 5 o'clock. I would drive to LA. It's a 3.5 hour drive. I'd sleep on the flight to Charleston. I would deal with the tenant on Saturday. I would sleep on the flight on the way home. I would come home for 3 hours. I actually didn't sleep because I finished processing the lease. I went into work. Thankfully, tea exists. And this was before all these sports energy drinks. And then I crashed at 5 o'clock as soon as I came home. There was no food involved. But the point is, like, I did that and it got us through that. That house we sold for $50,000 profit. We took that $50,000. We bought a house out in California. We sold that for 160-ish profit, and that's what bought our dream house. That craziness was what let us buy the house on the water that has tons of equity because we were able to buy it and fix it up. So I'm a huge believer in just roll with it.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. I wanted to say there too, if you're a landlord and you are, advertising your property, obviously be sure to put it on the military MLS, list it there if you're a landlord. But also, if you need help, if you are dislocated from your property and something goes wrong and you need someone to lay eyes on it, give us a shout. We can connect you to a local realtor who is going to have a team to be able to go in and support you on like an hourly fee basis. I was in that situation where the only time anything ever went wrong with my first rental was when I was 4 days postpartum and 6 hours away. I could not get in my car and drive to go check out what was wrong. And so we used our network to get a local military connected realtor on site to simply serve as an independent contractor and put eyes on the property. And guess what? As it turns out, nothing was actually wrong, but we hired an independent contractor through our network to do that. So if you are a landlord and you need that resource, that is another reason why the military MLS is here for you. We're going to help you connect those to individuals like that who can support you. I would also add to that our business directory, which is coming soon, you will see on our web platform, there is a business directory. We intend to fill that entire business directory up with contractors who can support our landlords. So, people who have done tree services, et cetera, who can help you with your properties. Okay. 2 more questions, maybe 3. Recommendations for battling the astronomical property tax increases currently occurring from equalization reassessments. That's
You
from
need to
Kendra.
fight them. You have to fight them. So you need the biggest thing. Can you tell me where you're talking about?
Kendra, where are you?
So, okay, there's 3 biggest advice that I have from friends that have these issues. We don't operate in an area with super high property taxes, so it's not really a concern for us right now. But one, they go in Illinois, they go in every single year and they fight it. They come up with a company. There are also companies that will fight it for you. 2, if you have a homestead, look into it. A lot of times military are allowed to keep one homestead. So a lot of people will keep Texas, Florida, Illinois, like New Jersey, those type of really high ones. And then second, that might not be one of the houses that you want to keep. We didn't keep our South Carolina house because we were paying so much in taxes. I was paying more on my $90,000 South Carolina house than I was on my $300,000 California house. So for us, because we were being penalized so much as investors, it didn't make sense to keep it. But for a lot of people, A, they put it in the cost of doing business, B, they fight it, and C, a lot of people just get out.
Yeah. Our property tax is pretty astronomical where we are, and that's one of the reasons we're thinking about selling this one, even though it was intended to be a buy and hold. So yeah. Thank you. Next question. If you want to fight it, one of the ways that you can do that is by looking at all of the properties around you too, to assess what their property taxes are. Just as a side note, we can help guide that process if you need some support. Do you suggest paying a deposit to bring down the VA funding fee?
Love that question. So, right, if you owe the VA funding fee, then right, if you're a subsequent user, you know that that fee is 3.3% of the loan amount. If you choose to make an investment into that property, a down payment, you can reduce that VA funding fee from 3.3 with a 5% down payment down to 1.5. Or if you put 10% down, you have the ability to lower it to 1.25. I would tell you that depending on your short-term and long-term goals, it can make sense, right? Who wants to pay a fee that you don't actually get anything for? You can roll it into the loan, that's great. Pay it over time, that's fine. But if I've got the money and it's not going to do a disservice to me financially to pull it out of an investment and put it into the house, I might choose to do that. But if I like the liquidity that it allows me to have in my investment account, because
Yeah,
if I put it in the house, I can't get to it. I can't touch it until
right.
I sell it or I borrow against it. So it's going to depend on each specific individual, but your loan officer can walk you through what those options look like so you make
Yeah,
the best decision.
right. Thank you so much. And you guys can use our form that's in the chat if you want to speak with Michelle or speak with a loan officer at New Res. Last question that we will answer, and we've really already talked about it a little bit, but I want to close the loop for Sina. Sina wants to know, if you're renting a house, but you're moving back to the area, how can you make sure that you're able to have a tenant move out? And this is in the chat in a few places, but Elizabeth has called it a reverse clause. And that is a clause in the lease that indicates if the owner of the property likewise receives military orders relocating them back to the jurisdiction or location of the home, that they have the right to terminate the lease.
So
It's
all I did was I added in like in our clause to do that, it says tenant or landlord. I added or landlord in the standard California clause to make it cover both parties. So 2 words.
And we
Obviously
use
talk to a lawyer, but
yeah.
this is what I
And
did.
for clarification there, we use a Florida lease. And I'm going to tell you that like any realtor who's worth their salt in any state will be able to log into their state forms and provide you a lease. They may charge a fee to do that. They may not charge you anything to do that, but there are formal templates for almost every state governing tenant and lease agreements. If you make changes to it, you need to consult with an attorney. So if you review that, and other than what's allowed to be modified in that lease, because there will be check this box if this, check this box if that. If you make a change outside of what's allowed to be flexible, that's when we need to bring in a legal consultant. And spending, a little bit of time, a little bit of money, a few $100s on a legal consultant initially is much better for you in the long run because you can use that lease for years and years to come. But yeah, that's absolutely applicable. We ended up adding a paragraph and a separate clause to our lease. So that is it for today. Thank you all so much for your time. Thank you, Elizabeth, for showing up and giving us your real life experiences. Thank you so much, Michelle, for showing up and giving us all of the VA loan juicy details. All right. Thank you all so much. I hope you have a great day, and thanks for coming to PCS to Profit. Thank you, Kristen. Thank you, Esmeralda. Thank you, Nikki. Thank you, Eliza. Thank you, Joe. Your questions help make this conversation fun. Thank you, Windrush. Thank you, Sina, Zoila, Allison. Thank you, Brittany. We're so glad that you were all here. You guys have a great day. Thanks for joining this episode of my military lifestyle show. If you found this topic helpful, please hit subscribe and also share with your other MilSpouse besties. Oh, and I love getting your comments and feedback. I personally respond to them. So if you comment on this episode, I'll get back to you with an answer and advice.